Hello, everyone. My name is Vanessa Burns, and I head up product development at InsightRX. Today, I'd like to talk to you about value-based pricing in healthcare and ways that you can optimize patient exposure and response using model-informed precision dosing. What we've seen over the past few years is that healthcare is shifting from a volume-based paradigm to a more value-based paradigm. What this means is that a number of different organizations and institutions are coming together to try to provide better outcomes to the patients. And what that means from a payer perspective is that as a company, a payer will reimburse that company more if a patient has a good outcome. And there are a number of ways to achieve this. You can do this through better monitoring, better dosing, better selection of patients for clinical trials or for the drug at the commercial level. But ultimately, this requires our industry to come together and put many different pieces in place to be able to offer the best outcomes for the patient. At InsightRX, we fundamentally believe that this is incredibly important both to patients and to the future of healthcare. And what we try to help companies do is choose the right patient based on various factors, including the disease, the potential response, genetics, and moving forward, also, once you have the right patient, to choose the right drug, and once you have chosen the right drug, to choose not only the right dose, but potentially also the right interval for that drug. At InsightRX, we approach the problem of optimizing patient outcomes and improving patient response by developing a companion application that can be used in clinical trials or at the point of care. And what this means is that we have a cloud-based application driven by population PK models or exposure response relationships, where we input patient characteristics and then actually output either a dose recommendation, a recommendation to stop treatment, or a recommendation to change the medication. We also can deliver various analytics capabilities to be able to work with adaptive clinical trials and make dose escalation decisions in real time by correlating things like adverse events with exposure. How do we do this? What's under the hood? So we use a combination of quantitative pharmacology, which I mentioned earlier, namely population PK models and PK/PD models, combined with a Bayesian modeling strategy to be able to provide a recommendation for the right dose for that particular patient. And this is particularly applicable for drugs that have narrow therapeutic windows, where if you underdose that drug, you may have less efficacy, but if you overdose, you may see toxicity. And this is particularly important in fields like oncology, various types of chemotherapy, ocular drugs, and any types of drugs where you potentially want to see and reduce adverse events. At InsightRX, we have three different types of products. We have our InsightRX Nova platform, which provides dosing decision support at the point of care. We also have our Apollo Analytics product, where we can take data from Nova or standalone data from either the EHR or from a flat file and perform analytics on that. And this is particularly useful for different types of clinical trials where you need to do either single or ascending multiple dose trials or adaptive clinical trials. And then we really put this all together via our sort of human-assisted AI, which is the continuous learning, where based on the response that we see for the aggregate patient data in Apollo, we can then take that and actually update the population PK model that is used in Nova to provide the dosing decisions. So this provides a nice continuous feedback loop where we can collect information from the patient, analyze that, and then actually update the model to improve patient care. The key, though, is being able to deploy this at scale. And so we actually operate in a two-sided marketplace. On one hand, we have our biopharma partners, where we develop applications throughout all phases of the drug life cycle, phase 1, 2, and 3, and commercial launch, and also our provider market, where we actually have our platform being used in hospitals for dosing of common medications like vancomycin and aminoglycosides, chemotherapeutics. And we actually are integrated on the provider side with some of the largest medical records. So we are integrated with the Epic EHR, Cerner, and Premier, which is a large GPO. I will have a plugin here for our quality management system. The platform is built under quality management system as per CFR Part 820 and ISO 1345. So we are compliant from an FDA standpoint to be able to provide these services both commercially and also during clinical trials. And so now I want to get to what I think we're all here to talk about, which are applications for biopharma. And we have a number of collaborations that are active and ongoing right now that I'll highlight. And as I alluded to earlier, we offer dosing decisions and services both in clinical trials and at the point of care, so post-commercial launch for different drugs. Where we see the most interest in clinical trials is really around optimizing combination therapies. For instance, if you're on multiple chemotherapy drugs, there are certainly the drug-drug interactions become very complicated, and being able to optimize those individual drugs often looks very different than being able to optimize the combined regimen. And we also optimize conditioning therapies for single drugs, things like Busulfin or melphalan. On the analytics side, we also offer real-time clinical trial analytics, where we can perform model updates and use machine learning to glean new insights about how your patients are responding. At the point of care, we also are able to launch these companion applications directly into all of our hospitals that already use InsightRX, and also can launch them through the major EHRs, Epic and Cerner, and also go through Premier. So I want to dive in a little bit more to some of the different use cases that we've seen, where we've seen the biopharma industry shift toward this idea of better outcomes for patients by individualizing the dosing. And at the very beginning, where we've seen some traction in the pre-approval and phase 1 stage, is really analytics for clinical trials. And I know almost all of you have analytic services through your CRO or in-house to provide analytics for clinical trials. But what our platform offers is really an integrated solution where we not only take the information from the CRO or the site, the EDC, but we can actually integrate that with the laboratory results and any other data that is available, perform real-time PK analysis, and allow you to assess things like being able to perform faster dose escalations if you're doing a dose escalation study. We've also seen this be very valuable because we can look at the response between adverse drug events and the PK parameters. So this can give you a very early indication of if your drug will need PK guided dosing or a particular AUC target range, for instance, for later stage clinical trials. Looking a little later down the pipeline, where we see adoption sort of in phase 1 and 2, sometimes phase 3, is actually using model-informed precision dosing during the clinical trial. And there are two benefits to this. Obviously, to maximize treatment efficacy, so to get all of your patients within a particular target range versus giving flat dosing, and also to improve safety outcomes. With a narrower target range for your patients, you're likely to see more consistent responses. And if you know that you do not want to go over a particular target, we can avoid those adverse events. And where we've seen this used is supporting label expansion into new patient populations, particularly patient populations that are high risk. So neonate patient populations, rare diseases, things like that. And then finally, actual companion dosing applications. So later stage clinical trials, all the way through post-approval and post-commercial launch, having that companion application that goes along with the drug. So at the point of care, a physician will be able to come in, enter the patient characteristics, and based on the population PK model or the exposure response model that we have, be able to provide both an initial dosing recommendation to that patient, estimate how that patient is likely to respond, and then once we have various metrics about how that patient is doing, whether those are therapeutic drug monitoring levels that come back through blood samples or other types of responses such as patient quality of life metrics, we can incorporate those into the model and then actually update the dosing regimen or interval as needed. So I wanted to talk through a few real world examples of these. And I put up a few just select examples here just to show you sort of the range where we see precision dosing actually occurring in clinical trials. So you can see that we work with both large companies and small companies. And the areas range from anticoagulation to oncology to gene therapy to actually doing the real-time analytics during the clinical trials. And we also see this in standard clinical trials and also adaptive clinical trials. So I wanted to go through a few examples. And I think the one that is relevant to a large part of the audience here today is this idea of optimizing conditioning for gene therapy trials. And so we're actually working with a number of companies on this, many of who are members here. And what we have seen and what is known about busulfin is that there is very much an exposure response relationship where if you are targeting a particular AUC range for busulfin, you are likely to have much better outcomes. And if you go over that range, you're going to have more adverse events like veno-occlusive disease, mucositis, and potentially mortality. But if you go under that range, you're likely to have poor engraftment and have graft failures. And so there really is a particular target range that you want to hit for busulfin. And so here on the left, what I'm showing you today is how our platform can actually improve target attainment for busulfin. The far left plot shows the range, the average and the range if you use conventional dosing, which is just weight based on the FDA label. And you can see that there's large variability there. And you're actually almost always overshooting your target, where the target is indicated by the red line. If you use a hybrid approach where you use weight-based dosing and then also model-based dosing, you can narrow that a little bit. But then with an updated model based on a particular patient population and our Bayesian forecasting, you can dramatically reduce the patient variability and also really achieve getting to the correct target for busulfin. And so what does that mean for our gene therapy partners? This means that compared to the standard approach, where you are doing either weight-based or NCA-based calculation for your gene therapy, what we can achieve with our Bayesian forecasting is actually optimizing the chemotherapy, reducing the side effects, leading to higher engraftment rates and better outcomes. So this is really helping you achieve your clinical trial success by minimizing the confounding effects of chemotherapy and getting more patients through to actually getting infused. This example I wanted to talk to you about today is a slightly different flavor because I want to highlight the fact that we do not need to have therapeutic drug monitoring or blood levels taken to assess drug concentrations in the blood. And so this example is for neutropenia. And our partner institution actually is interested in administering combination chemotherapies for a variety of blood-based cancers. However, neutropenia is the primary adverse event. And so if a patient experiences neutropenia, they either need to stop chemotherapy or lower the dose, and that actually may allow the cancer to continue growing or to recur. And so what we wanted to do here was create an exposure response model or a PK/PD model where we actually could predict neutropenia based on an existing model that's in the literature and also the patient's levels of their white blood cells. And so in the platform, we perform the same simulations and recommendations that we would do for a particular drug. But in this case, we're actually predicting neutropenia. So if we think that the patient is going to get neutropenia, we can either recommend lowering the dose or having a dosing holiday, but not actually stopping the full chemotherapy. And the idea here is that we will decrease patient dropout and improve outcomes where the patient is able to stay on chemotherapy for the entire course. And so with that, I will wrap up. Healthcare and biopharma in particular is absolutely ready for precision dosing intelligence, driven by model-informed precision dosing at the point of care. This is going to take a lot of people coming together to be effective for every patient in every clinical trial. At InsightRX, we've already made several steps in the right direction to be able to improve outcomes for patients, reduce adverse events, and also provide patients with the opportunity to have better efficacy for each of their treatments. We have a number of different drugs that are available in the platform, ranging from infectious disease, bone marrow transplants, oncology, chemotherapy, conditioning, and we can certainly talk more about those at another time. But with that, I will wrap up. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is on the screen. Thank you very much.